is that these be small components of the various APIs and some other newer standards as well that are discretely usable for development themselves. So you don't have to grab the entire OGC API features parts 1, 2, 3 to get a very simple feature service running on your website. You can grab just a couple of building blocks to get you the bare minimum and work with those. And by dividing these standards into smaller pieces, they're more consumable. There is still, though, the advantage to having all-inclusive holistic standards, because there are cases where you need a sturdy, robust feature service that supports coordinate reference systems and no shortcuts. And so you may need to use something that we bundle together a bunch of building blocks as pieces, but or as a whole standard. But this also means that these little building blocks can be used elsewhere. So the people on features have developed some building blocks that will be used in other standards. The record standard, replacement to the old catalog services standards, will reference a few small building blocks out of the feature standard. And so that gives us more reuse of these components and more consistency. And ultimately what we get are a whole set of little resources, each of which is a little building block that you can combine as you need in novel ways. These building block components are now all independently registered. So you may be familiar with OGC's registries. We have a registry for coordinate reference systems. We have one for terms and definitions, etc. Historically, this was all called the definition server for reasons that require a beer. It's now all been referred to as OGC Rainbow. So that's the name of our registry complex. A whole bunch of little registries that do all sorts of things, human and machine searchable. But we're building these registered components to a fashion that eventually a clever developer can ask the registry what they want to do, and it will find the appropriate building blocks and toss back to that user. These are the building blocks you need to bundle together to do your work. That's a novel way also to understand an implementation. No longer do you go to a website, download a PDF of a web feature service, read through page after page after page until you find the various requirements you need, try to extract that knowledge from that rather ugly long paper document. Now you can just grab the little pieces you need that are independently registered and not necessarily have to worry about their heritage and parentage, right? You just are able to use them. And for each of those resources, we provide very detailed information, including linkages to how else they might be used in other standards. And always sample code and or sample encodings, lots and lots of samples. And so I think that's probably the biggest contribution to this developer website has been the samples that people have been providing us. A lot of these coming from not just the open source community, our commercial members and our government members. And we're always asking for more sample code. Let your code live in perpetuity as the beginning of a copy and paste operation. We love as much sample as we can, but all these available now for the standards as well. And then the remaining kind of resources you might need. So we always retain our schemas. Our schemas are available for your use for implementation. Make sure those are still referenced back to the appropriate building blocks and any other references back to the actual standard itself. So if you remember way back when I was whining about what we haven't done yet and talking about our vision for this multiple views of a standard, this is how it's finally being realized. That little bit down there that says source reference will point you back to a paragraph in a standard document that looks like a traditional standard document and give it in the context of the big standard itself. And so we do want to ensure, no matter what, how people are using these blocks, they are able to back out to the source and understand its context, because otherwise we just don't find these little blocks terribly valuable. They cannot stand alone. They need some context, and being able to reference where they came from, we find to be quite useful. But we can even make it easier. So I'll walk through really quick this really cool configurator that Ioana Zamoas made. So Ioana Zamoas is our developer relations staff member at OGC. She's a longtime contributor to a number of open source softwares in the geospatial community, really big in QGIS and others. She's got a lot of project work experience with the European Commission as well, and with ESA and others. And so she's got a good background from the breadth of the type of users of OGC standards. And she wrote this configurator to help get people to find the right bits of the APIs they might need to do implementation. So if you go into the configurator, which is linked on the developer website, it will start with some fairly simple questions to help you hone in on what you need. So first question is, do you want to provide information for features like roads, points of interest, etc.? And you click yes or no if you want that kind of information. The next question, what do you want to do with these features? We've said yes. You want them to use and download, but they don't really mind if the CRS is WGS84, need to support other CRSs, or my favorite question or answer ever, what is a CRS? And we get that all the time. People tell us that they want the data to be in lat long. Well, you've heard that a million times in your lives. You all know it's a little bit more complicated than just lat long, but that's what most people and most developers who don't come from the geospatial industry see. They just see the lat long thing. So you can actually tell them, I don't know what a CRS is, and that's going to help make it easier to find the right API or building blocks, because the presumption, but probably accurate, is you're not using some state 1927 state plane from southern Mississippi or something for your projected data. Rather, you're using, quote, lat long. And then do you want to look at other kinds of information like tile data, be those images, raster tiles, map tiles, etc. And once you answer the questions at submit, it'll tell you what parts of the standard you need with links back to those developer resources. And so all of that expert system knowledge is based on those registered building blocks I talked about earlier, some inferences we're making about how people might want to use those, and that's coming from the experience of our developer relations person. If you have not met Ioana yet, she's a great person to meet. All of you are also welcome to work with Ioana about doing a developer workshop for your organization. We do those for a lot of our members, where she'll sit down for 2 to 3 hours, hear about the kind of work you're doing with the standards, and identify the resources we have available, or kind of brainstorm what resources we might be able to augment. And she's done piles of these. A lot of these people, a lot of your organizations on the call have already experienced these. And every one of those workshops helps us refine this model, not just the way we register the content, but the inferences we make about how content might be linked and how people might want to use it. So that talks about where we've gotten to. But I had that initial title for this presentation, how we get over the starting line or the finish line. And that's really the crux of what we've still got to do. And this is where really I'm hoping that the remainder of our community can help us identify those next steps and what are the most important next things we can do. If you go to the OGC website today and you want to know about the web feature service, you're going to now land on a landing page that gives you a little bit of background about that web feature service, and then gives you links to the standard itself. But that is no better than just landing on the standard, because the overview came from the introduction to the standard. So you're not getting anything useful. And to be completely honest, that is the exact same thing as the old OGC website. So all we've done is made a prettier, nicer font version of something that's been floating around for 8 years. And that landing page is still not completely useless, but of limited value. So the experience of someone looking for OGC content just from the OGC website is still rather poor. And we're not able to pull people in directly to what they need to see. What we'd really prefer is that a user lands on what I showed you earlier on that OGC API features site, and they right away are taken to some of the resources and live links to where they can get running implementations of the standard to play with right away, or samples in code, or other documentation that supports it. Because ultimately, the vast majority of users who come to our website are not people who are searching for a document because they need to put it in procurement language. They're people who actually want to implement these standards. And until we can really drive people to this type of landing, and let them dig and let them dig. And maybe way down when you scroll the page, you finally find a link to read the whole ugly original document. But until then, you're finding this kind of information. We're going to be a lot better off. And as just a fact, a lot of you probably know Jeff de la Beaugier, I can never say Jeff's last name, Jeff DLB, who recently got OGC's Lifetime Achievement Award and was the original editor of the Web Map Service WMS standard. WMS to this day makes up 7% of all hits on the OGC website. 7% of all people going to the OGC website come from a search engine looking for a web map service. So 7% of our traffic is still looking for a specific standard. And all of those are landing on a fairly ugly landing page. It just tells you a little bit about it. And then the people have to discover that long list I showed you much earlier of the current standard, and then all the struck out versions that aren't there or that are no longer supported. Sorry, they're still there. They're just not supported. We're really doing a disservice to 7% of our traffic. And we're doing a disservice to the kind of people, I think, that want this information. So moving forward, we do want to structure the first view you get to these standards to look like this. We are asking all of you in the community, what are the things that when you are searching to start working against a new standard, what is the first thing you want to see? What attracts your attention? What gives you instant use and instant resources? And we'll tailor these sites accordingly. So do please sign up for our workshops as you can. Please do get involved in OGC if you're not already, and pester me anytime you want on what we're trying to do with these resources. Dig around, look at them, give us advice. All of us on OGC staff have really thick skin. So if you're going to tell us something that we don't want to hear, that's okay. We'll listen anyhow, and we'll probably be better because of it. And so that, thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to answer any kind of questions we have.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So there was some side chat, and I wonder if you could comment a little bit more on early on, you were talking about kind of the need to have unambiguous specifications to support procurement.
Mm-hmm.
Can you expand a little bit more on that dynamic? I think I don't know that everybody, if you haven't gone through a procurement experience with a contractor, you might not have a complete understanding of why that's so important.
Yeah, it's come to, I mean, it's the kind of ugly truth is it's a legacy of the nature in which large procurements, either by governments or extremely large corporations, tend to occur. And it's that legacy of proposals used to be evaluated by the pound, not the word. So the heavier the proposal, the better it looked. And all that procurement information, all of the descriptions of what was being provided, verbosity was always welcome. And so the way standards were written, starting with ISO ages and ages ago, were to write them to as much language as you need necessary to describe what the standard is doing, such that if someone goes through and reads it all, they can come to only one conclusion, and this is how something has to happen. And so there was never an incentive to become efficient with the way you describe things. There was never an incentive, frankly, to use colorful diagrams, because for ages and ages, you can only put black and white diagrams in standards. And so much was effectively not allowed, that standards have been shaped to this sort of legacy look that those who are experienced in procurement are used to seeing and expect to see, and they're big and fat and they look good in a proposal, but that are not really understandable by the people who are doing the work. And we lay the blame, and you hear a lot of defense organizations will certainly acknowledge the blame too, that there's this long legacy, particularly in defense procurements against geospatial standards, that don't want to see the documents change. They like the way they're written. They're easy for people of that ilk to read. And they are easy to defend should the procurement come to question, or should the contractor fail to meet certain objectives. You can go back and say, well, here's 800 words that tell you how to make a line as opposed to a curve. That's just the legacy, and it's something that's taking a far more time than we thought to move away from. I mean, it's only been the last 5 years that OGC has officially been able to publish HTML first to the satisfaction of some of our members. So that tells you enough right there. We were PDF first until 5 years ago.
Yeah. I guess the part I also want to get at is that there's a balance to, even if you can publish HTML and have nice developer support, you do still need something testable.
Yep. And that's the balance. That's a hard balance, in that if we can say it with less words, or if we can illustrate it, or we can do it with YAML and Swagger Hub, and it still meets the criteria for testability and procurability, wouldn't that be great? And so how far, and we're willing to push a little bit. Some of these standards are really short. If you read the recently released GeoPose standard, for the simple case of a GeoPose, it's pretty tiny amount of information to get the point across. So we're pushing it. We'll see how far we can push. Features and geometries JSON. So the superset of GeoJSON is coming out for review in a couple weeks now. And that's another one that's become extremely efficient with language to describe criteria.
Well, anybody want to jump in and pose questions?
Anybody want to go volunteer and read all these things and tell me what you think, please? Yes, so I see a question about the OGC API configurator. It is public. And let's see, I think I had it almost up on my computer. Let me see if I can find the right window here. It takes a little bit of time to find it because we've buried it a little bit on purpose, because we're still trying to get everything working. So the configurator, I'm getting there, hang on. It's on the building block site. And here's the link. It's been done in type form. So that's the configurator. And you find it from the building blocks website, which I'm pasting in here. So that's the building blocks website, and then it's got the configurator down a ways. It's fairly limited right now. There's not too much in the configurator. We're still soliciting feedback from people about how useful it is and what kind of questions we should be asking. The what is a CRS question was great, but we learned a really hard lesson talking to the World Wide Web Consortium, the W3C folks, that we keep using this word feature, and no one in the web community has a clue what we mean by feature. They think a feature is something in the browser that lets you change the scale or the zoom or whatever. It's a feature is it's a feature in the same fashion that our cars, you've got keyless ignition, right? That's your feature. No, feature, we have a really weird concept of feature that no one seems to understand outside our community. So there's some other language like that we need to get into the configurator.
You mentioned, I forget the exact term you used. I think I wrote it down as persistent example implementations, but who would want to receive that information? I don't think I saw the news release.
Let's see, I'll put the link in the chat as well. So the announcement just came out for an open science persistent demonstrator. And the vision we've had for this persistent demonstrator, actually, it's been realized a couple of times in little bits and pieces. And that is that time and time again, people want to see the standard running or see data available served by a standard to understand what benefits they might get. And you can always point and say, oh, well, here's the back end of the federal mapping systems that include WMS pointers where you can go grab some WMS, but it's deep down in there, and the websites change over time, and the national map doesn't always make the OGC resources super easy to find and such. And so we haven't had really great links to those types of services. And in the particularly more recent one, this open science demonstrator, we're trying to find some samples of reasonably current Earth observation data that are being used primarily for climate studies and such, that are made available and are also made available in the context in which they're useful. So if there is a data cube of information from a particular constellation of satellites that provides some information you can use for historical climate analysis, and we can describe not just the data, but the processing that enables that data to be used for further analysis, we'd like all those demonstrators to be available. We did this a few years ago with CityGML, which is a standard that models urban environments, 3D buildings, and all that stuff. And we had a whole bunch of persistent data stores, and it was hugely useful. We had so many people wanting to implement, and they said if I could only see some sample data that I could pull over and understand, and we even had purposely bad sample data to show people the kind of problems they might find in sample data in their own data and how to work around it. It's been very useful. We've offered this in the past. So persistent demonstrator intent now is just kicking off with this open science thing formally, but we have a whole lot more in mind. And we'll be planning probably throughout 2024 to have a number more of these calls.
We'll talk. Ethan, get your hand up.
Hi. Yeah, thanks, guys. Good talk. A lot of the examples and stuff seem to focus on APIs and improving documentation and figuring them out and modularity, selecting them. I guess I'm wondering if this is similarly applicable to documentation on data models and encodings and things. And I'm, of course, thinking ZAR and etcdf, HDF5. And I guess I'm wondering, those are kind of maybe have some added complexity because they're all external community kind of standards. So anyway, I think there's a question in there somewhere.
Yeah, and it's a valid point. I mean, we did the APIs first because it was fresh meat for us, right? Completely new approach to standards. We felt we had a little bit more leeway to not just develop them differently, but highlight how they work differently. And because we'd committed to a common platform in OpenAPI for describing the API interface. Sorry, that doesn't make sense, right? The interface of the interface. Anyhow, to describing the API itself, we could offer consistent views that developers would understand across a bunch of standards, and it was an easy win. So we could show off a whole bunch of APIs with not a whole lot more work than showing off one. All that being said, there is some work on a few of the other encoding standards and data model standards out there that are evolving. You'll see the same stuff coming up for JSON features and geometry soon. There's some in work for the MUDI effort, which is the model for underground data and whatever, I can't remember the rest, it's data something information. Anyhow, it's a underground infrastructure standard. We'll have a lot of things for MUDI, and we'll continue with others. We would love with some of the community standards to provide more of this information. That's probably going to take a bit more effort to coordinate, but we're committed that, as ZAR as an example, our developer resources, we plan to link directly to those that are out there for the ZAR community already. And so if you come to find ZAR on a new, pretty fun OGC landing page, that looks more like that, as opposed to this, that you'll get links back to the ZAR developer information that's already been published.
Right. Yep. That makes sense. Thanks a lot.
Yeah. And again, for a lot of these other standards, not even if they're legacy, but if they're just radically different than APIs, which are, sort of the easiest things to describe with code, And if people have content they want to provide, we are, eager recipients. Happy to take any kind of content, and you get full credit. So we'll make sure to attribute it properly.
Yeah, and I'll just add, all this you've done looks great, and I think that's really good advances, and definitely interested in it. Thanks.
Thanks, Ethan. Yeah, just that 9-year thing there.
All right. I think we rolled from people arriving to jumping into the talk so smoothly that Mike didn't remember to record at the beginning. So we'll have to circle back if we want to record the whole talk. But I've got some notes which will end up on the wiki. We'll get links and everything out. Any other questions or follow-ups for Scott?
Everyone's free to use anything on the presentation. If you need any slides, again, we're game anytime. I mean, you all are pretty much all OGC members already. We're happy to help, do a lot more deep dive into the developer resources and use that as an opportunity to refine what we're offering right now.
Actually, Dave Coyle just commented about formal specification languages. UML seems to be still present, but not as present as it was 9 years ago in these specifications, and that's quite an evolution. I've been exposed to some stuff in the survey here where we're starting to build specifications as JSON almost data sets. Is there any future to this where the I guess the building blocks essentially have their own data model in a sense?
Yes, and we have a JSON data model for them.
Okay.
That's what's underlying that. The definite or the OGC Rainbow registry of the building blocks. So there's a JSON underlying model. Yeah, Rainbow.
Can't wait to have a beer and hear about that one.
It's actually a really good story. But anyhow, so there is a JSON data model underlying those. There was, and I'm pretty sure you were at the meeting too, Dave, when we were in Boulder back in 2015 or 16, I can't remember. We had a debate on stage about should OGC adopt a formal modeling protocol and language or not. And the decision was, yeah, we should model whenever possible, but we shouldn't force people to use UML. And I would say for the traditional data modeling standards, the majority use UML, but not all. And we've got a few people that want to do all their modeling in OWL now. So, there's still going to be something of a revolution. We don't adhere to the very strict ISO TC211 thing where there has to be a unified single model for all standards. Take it or leave it. We could have chosen to go that path, but I think the OGC members weren't willing to do so, and we offer a whole lot more standards, and it'd be pretty hard to do.
Yeah, accessibility is king at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much.
Of course.
We'll give everybody a few minutes to transition to your next thing. And Scott, I'll be in touch if you're. I gotta think whether it's worth re-recording the first 10-15 minutes or not. But we'll see where we land. So I'll be in touch.
Yeah. Let me know. I'm easy, although I'll be at our code sprint next week. So
All right.
anyone who wants to come online, if you want to travel to London next week, you can go live in person. But other than that, we're code sprint next week for a whole lot of these standards, free and open to anybody, and anyone can attend virtually. So the OGC website's got links to it, but it should be, these code sprints have become really big and cool. So this one should be a lot of fun.
Cool. All right. Well, very good information. Thanks for coming along, everybody. And we'll see you at the next one.
Thanks for inviting me, Dave. Appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
Okay, bye.